There is, in fact, a field of intelligent energy that connects everything, certainly in our world, and it's believed beyond our world, even the entire universe.
You've seen the evidence that tells us it is more likely than not that we are living in a simulated world, in a virtual universe. When we leave our simulation, we shift our consciousness. We go back to where it is that we came from.
Western science has just arrived at the understanding that there is, in fact, a field of intelligent energy that connects everything, certainly in our world, and it's believed beyond our world, even the entire universe. Our science is only now arrived at the understanding through the experiments and through the studies and the modeling of the equations that tell us, in fact, that field exists. So this is the place where we are now, and it's the place where the ancient, the indigenous traditions have always begun. They have always started from the place that we are part of everything, that we are part of a greater existence, that everything is connected, and they have devoted their time, rather than trying to explore and prove to themselves this existence really is there, they devoted their times to understanding how to work within this existence. What does it mean to life and death? What does it mean to our time together in this world? If this field is really out there, can we communicate with it? And if we can, what is the language that it understands? Well, the understandings in terms of Western science that this intelligent field exists in late 1990s, early 2000s is when the experiments actually confirmed what Max Planck in 1944 stated. The father of quantum physics, Max Planck, actually said that the matter that we see in our world doesn't exist. It says the stuff we're made out of doesn't even exist, and the world that we see doesn't exist the way we believe it does. What he said was, what we see as matter is here because of the existence of what he called a conscious and intelligent mind, and these are his precise words. And he followed that statement by saying that underlying this mind is the matrix of all matter. And this is the coin he termed in 1944. Of course, the movie series was based on the studies that came afterward, but it's actually been around since the mid-20th century. So this field, the matrix, or the divine matrix as it now is being called, is recognized as the field of intelligent, non-conventional energy. It doesn't work the way electricity or broadcast energy works.
We identified the science-based discovery of a field of energy, a real-life matrix that functions in three very precise ways. This matrix, number one, it's the container for the universe itself and for all things that can happen in the universe. Number two, it's the bridge between our inner and our outer worlds. Everything that happens from within, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and beliefs, are conveyed to the world beyond our bodies through this field. And number three, the mirror. The mirror. This field is a mirror in the world for what we claim to be true in our deepest, sometimes subconscious beliefs. Well, scientists are no longer asking the question, are we connected? The field tells us that we are. Now, the question is, how deeply are we connected? How much influence do we really have in the world through this field? Well, there are two very futuristic scientific experiments that take us light years beyond anything that we've believed and science has accepted in the past. I want to share those with you. What they are showing, however, has opened the door to a possibility that modern science is now struggling with. So let's take a look at these two experiments. The first one was published in the Russian Bulletin of the Lebedev Physics Institute in 1992. And the experiment begins with something seemingly very innocent, a glass vessel, a vase, where all of the air has been completely drawn out of this vessel to create what we call a vacuum. So a vacuum implies that this vessel is empty, but we know it's not completely empty because there are still little photons of light that remain in this vessel. Scientists know this. So the question now is, where are those photons? They want to get a baseline and see where the photons are right now. So the first part of this experiment, they draw the air out of the vessel, and then they measure where these photons are in the vessel. Are they all piled up on the bottom, or are they floating around the inside, or are they all stuck to the edges? And what they found was no surprise. The vessel showed that these photons are completely random. They're completely random. By the way, these are the same kinds of photons, the particles of matter that make up the atom itself. So we're dealing with these fundamental particles of the stuff that our world is made of, and that's important. So the scientists found that the distribution of the photons in this vessel was completely random. No surprise, that's what they expected. The next piece of this experiment is where, while the experiment is fascinating, what I find really fascinating is the thinking of the scientists that made the experiment possible. For a scientist trained in the scientific method, based upon all of those false assumptions that we saw earlier in this program, those assumptions of separation, for the scientists to move out of that box of thinking and begin asking new questions like, what if our assumptions are wrong? What would that tell us about our world? That's where it gets really interesting, and that's what the next part of this experiment is all about. Because what the scientists did was, into the vessel that had completely random photons, they put human DNA. Human DNA, because they wanted to see if human DNA has an effect on the photons. And before I go any further, I just want to invite you to think about what they're asking. Photons are the stuff this world is made of. DNA is the stuff we're made of. And they're asking, scientists are asking in the laboratory, does the stuff we're made of have an effect on the stuff our world is made of? This is where it starts to sound like science fiction, or at least something that an advanced yogi would be working with. But these are in a bona fide scientific laboratory, these questions. This is where they're being asked. So here's what they did. They took human DNA and they placed it inside the vessel. And then they measured the DNA again to see what would happen. And they measured the photons again to see what would happen. And the results of this experiment changed the way we have been conditioned to think about ourselves and the world. Because the photons went from being completely random when they were first measured, and in the presence of the human DNA, the photons are no longer random, they are ordered. They followed precisely the geometry of the DNA. The DNA was having a direct effect on the photons. The stuff we're made of is having a direct effect on the stuff our world is made of. Just like some of our most ancient and cherished indigenous and spiritual traditions have always told us that we are connected to the world. So this is the first experiment. Human DNA has a measurable effect on the stuff our world is made of. Now I want you to see the way the scientists responded to this. So I'm going to read this to you directly. In the journal Nanobiology, and this was published in 1995, the way the scientists described this, they said that the photons were described as behaving, and this is a quote, surprisingly and counterintuitively. Counterintuitively. It's counterintuitive because the scientific thinking is that everything is separate from everything else, and there is no stuff to convey any effect from the DNA to the matter. That's why it's counterintuitive to the science. But the next piece is what I find particularly interesting. I'm going to invite you to listen to the language. It says we are forced to accept the possibility. They're saying that they are forced. They're not saying it looks like, or it appears, or this is what we found. They're saying we are forced to accept the possibility that some new field of energy is being excited by the DNA. Well, I think we know it's not a new field. It's a field that's been around a long time. It's simply that we are just now recognizing that field and what it means to us. So the summary of this second experiment is that science now confirms that human DNA influences the stuff our world is made of through the photons by communicating directly through the field. That's a big piece. But now let me go to the second experiment. This experiment was published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration in 1994. It begins with human DNA once again, and this is a very precise kind of human DNA. It comes from umbilical cords of newborns because that DNA is what's called very pristine DNA. It hasn't been eroded over time, as happens as we mature in life. So it's a very pristine kind of DNA. And the DNA is isolated in one vessel, and that is encased in another vessel to make sure that there are no other influences that are happening from outside to influence the DNA.
You've seen the evidence that tells us it is more likely than not that we are living in a simulated world, in a virtual universe. And you've seen the evidence that is telling you that you have the potential to interact with this universe, to interact with this reality in ways that have seemed mystical in the past and were reserved for the monks and the nuns and the abbots and the shamans living mystical lifestyles. But now we know we don't need to live on a monastery halfway around the world and leave everything familiar to us, our loved ones, our jobs, our families, to embrace these seemingly mystical powers. Because when we understand the relationships, we demystify the experience. In the contemporary language of science, we are now talking about mystical connections, and we are marrying those connections with the best science of the modern world to give us a new view, an evolutionary edge to understand what's happening in our world, and beyond that, how we may direct the events of our lives and the events of the world in a positive, powerful way. Heaven. When we leave our simulation, we shift our consciousness. We go back to where it is that we came from. And for me, I believe that, and I think it's really good news. It means that we will see our friends and our loved ones again on the other side, what is called the veil, on the other side of that veil. And I hope that there's a time on that other side that we can look back and review everything we've done in this world and hopefully laugh about some of the mistakes that we've made while we were trying to learn about ourselves in this simulation. So heaven, I believe, is the ancient word for the world that we live in that exists on the other side, outside of the simulation that we find ourselves in right now. So the next question, what does that mean for death? Where do we go when we die?